Good morning.
Welcome everybody to FRB Friday Live. As the more observant of you will notice, I'm not in my usual location. We're talking about the future of work, and we've been talking about working in different locations. So today I'm in a Starbucks, which is very good and very nice, and everyone around me is being very patient and listening to me talk with great interest. So Stuart, I think there's a couple of things we're going to tackle today. We're going to talk about the session we had this week about future of work, and I'm really interested to review that, but also quiz you a little on where you got to about thinking of the future of HR and around measurement. And then we're going to just talk a little bit about diversity and inclusion, which is a session we're having this Tuesday. And as always, if anyone wants to join these sessions, go to www.frb.buzz, or if you're on LinkedIn, send me a message and we'll include you in the invites. So Stuart, the future of work discussion, one very insightful discussion. My opening thoughts we sometimes forget that a lot of this stuff was in development before the pandemic came along. We were already looking at well-being, office space, potentially using hubs to cut down the travel and the environmental impact of travel. And I thought it's really interesting to sort of just pause a minute and say, hang on, a lot of this stuff was already in progress. What were your thoughts on the discussion itself and some of the things that came up?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Yeah, a lot of the enablers like this was already being widely adopted way before the pandemic hit. The other thing I thought was interesting is the pandemic in reality only drove one thing, which was home working, right? Because of lockdown and needing to isolate, it drove and accelerated companies to test and trial and use home working as a premise. And actually home working is one tiny thing of a operating model, and everyone's talking about still home working. Yet before pandemic and even now, there's take location as just one axiom. Even on location, there's a myriad of options, right? From main sites to temp offices to hubs, to client premises to supply premises, and any of the above. Remote doesn't have to be home; it could be on the moon. So actually, even location has about a dozen different and any right. And that's just location. When you layer on other parts of an operation model, it could be contribution, whether that's time or at least a dozen different options there, from fixed hours, flexible hours, annualized hours, 0 hours, all these different, So by the time holiday entitlements and all, there's all sorts of different ways of looking at an operating model, which is a combination of where you work, how you work, who you work for, because even the roles can be different. You can work for one company, you can work for many companies, you can have many roles in a company. The combination are millions, right? And yet most of the conversation is just about home working, which is a surprise, because as you say, pre-pandemic we're looking at one another, and I think you need to find a way of properly evaluating all these variants for tomorrow's model.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Stuart. And there were a lot of people already on a more flexible model. Lots of consultants, lots of entrepreneurs, or just I don't know what percentage of the population were actually working that way anyway. So the things we can't ignore, of course, in that scenario is the technology side of things, and it gave a huge boost to the capability of working away from the office for lots of different reasons. And I love your comment about working on the moon, and it suddenly makes perfect sense now why Elon Musk is looking at his space program. Once again, he's ahead of the curve. So it's one of those things that we've been through that it has fundamentally changed what we do, and we're not going to go back. So how do we move forward? And I think that the conversation was interesting from the perspective that it did make us think, well, we have to, our mindset needs to change a little bit to say, okay, let's look at this again and find out what the truth is about what works and what doesn't work. I was interested as well in the document we've written as an outcome from this, how we look at measurement and how do we get a proper measurement framework in place to see what is effective and what is not effective. Because again, lots of people are getting pressure to go back to the office. Is that effective or isn't it effective? Lots of anecdotal stuff, but you could argue we haven't got the real evidence. I know they did some work in, I think it was Japan or something in the news. One of the Asian countries did some work on this, and they found actually it was fairly neutral. It didn't make any difference where people were, which was interesting, but it would certainly be really good, I think, and timely for companies to do some real assessment now of what works and what doesn't work for people.
It's interesting because we in the conversation earlier this week we touched collaboration, and there seems to be a bit of a spike of companies asking people to come back or demanding people to come back into the office at least 2 to 3 days a week, and then they sort of banner that underneath the banner of collaboration. But again, I think that's a falsism, right? Because most companies don't understand what collaboration is. They certainly don't know how to measure or assess collaboration. There is, and just because someone sat in the office, almost certainly with their earphones on, sat in the corner trying to mind their own business, does absolutely nothing for collaboration just because they're in the office, right? So I think there is a time, and don't get me wrong, massively important collaboration, I think, is massive. But actually, we need to find ways to make we maximize the collaboration in the right ways, at the right times when people need to collaborate. You don't necessarily collaborate on a Tuesday and Wednesday, then not on a Monday, Thursday, Friday, or whatever your pattern is. It just doesn't make any. You have to collaborate when you need to collaborate, and you need to make sure you're facilitating the mechanisms to do that. And if it was really important, why aren't companies almost objectivizing, measuring the degree of collaboration? And actually, I just don't think it is. I can't think of a company that does, right? So I think it's like one of those things that people talk about it, they really know what they're talking about. This way.
I totally agree with you, Stuart. If there's lots of good things, there's always good things that come out of these big developments, and if we could quantify, understand, value, and reward collaboration in a different way, that would be a terrific outcome. Because as we talked about in the group, and as we've all witnessed, collaboration is vital. But when does it truly happen, and who stimulates it? Who empowers it? When is it effective? When is it not effective? Because sometimes collaboration could just hold you back. So if we could, and I think there was a willingness in the group actually to try and look at some measures and try and think, how would we measure collaboration? I think it would be a terrific outcome if we were able to do it. And I think it's one of these things I'd put in this.
That takes us back to measurement, right? And I think collaboration is one aspect. And you're right. I think there's, if we're going to evaluate all these various topics alone, homework in just as one tiny little variant, we've got to think about, what's the critical success measures, right? And whether that's, business or individual productivity, team products, sustainability, carbon, well-being, talent acquisition, retention. There's many ways and many drivers for these different operating models, and I think we almost need to sort of lay groundwork of what was the right sort of measure set to best evaluate these different models in a more systemic way.
Yeah, I think it would be great to try and do something across the participants in FRB, because we've got different industries represented, and all those models are going to be different, but there are some fundamentals in that we could potentially build a framework to have a look at it and really get, as we said right at the start, get some evidence to what's happening, rather than a blanket approach. And collaboration is one of those things that's too easy to, if you like, pick on. If you were looking for a reason why people should go back to the office, it's an easy target. But as we said, I don't think we understand enough yet to it were well-being, work-life balance. We're going to talk about diversity later on, and certainly the pandemic opened the door to a lot of people that struggle to walk into big social situations. For different reasons, or even attend work, be present in work. So we mustn't forget that it's opened a door for a lot of people as well, and we don't want to lose that. We don't want to roll that back. So again, I think it's something we need to companies need to look at and need to study.
Yeah, I agree. And that I think we have to open the old chestnut of HR policies and processes too. They're often cited as the things that either enable or disable some of these operating models because they haven't moved quick enough, or they're just not fit for purpose for the new ways of working. And actually, interestingly, the more I sort of this and the other conversations we're having, I do question whether some of the core traditional constructs of HR are really fit for purpose. And again, it's a question because I don't know what the answers are. But if you take traditional HR mechanisms, a lot of them stem from obviously making sure that we're legally fit for purpose and we're fair to all. And these are good principles. That no one's debating any of this. But the way they actually work, organizational design that does some sort of work breakdown structure, defines roles, and then recruits and selects fairly to find a candidate that fits the role. Where actually the more and more conversations we're sort of getting to, we sort of talk more about the need to play to individual talent, and therefore how do you almost turn that on its head, which is you hire talent and then you create a role that best fits the individual, but that potentially changes how your reward and processes work, because most companies will pay some market-based salary based off of some role benchmarking, and some sort of bonus on sort of company performance and individual contribution. Whereas if you turn it to a talent model, you're probably paying solely for talent and not benchmarking a role, because every role could be unique in some form, and it almost then changes what is the principles of the methods to really underpin these future ways of working, right? And I don't know, again, I think you're being an conversation to get into. I don't know what the answers will be, but I think it's worth exploring.
I totally agree with you. I'm involved in a situation now where a large company is trying to innovate, trying to do something differently, and they have lots of conversations about what they'd like to do and how they'd like to do it. Then they try and pin all the people into the existing roles and responsibilities. They're just going through it now, and it's crazy. It's like, well, you want all this stuff, and it's not lack of effort or people willing to change, but they'd have to change something else. It's like now we're putting another level of change on top. So I think that debate around HR would be a really good one to have, because it does get knocked a lot. People like you have been very innovative in HR, and a lot of the HR people we talk to now are actually very innovative. The lady from Green King was really up there. She had her background in Google. And you're really thinking. So I wonder if HR processes and procedures are actually holding back HR people as well, interestingly. So I think that's a really that's something we're going to pursue. I think the next time the Future of Work group meets, we're going to be talking about measurement and how that may roll out, and we're also going to be talking about HR, because it's one of the things that comes in not only to the Future of Work conversations, but the diversity conversations, even the customer conversations. That tends to be in there. In fact, the digital conversations, HR tends to come in as one of the things that perhaps slows it down. So, yeah, so we're going to do that. So anyone in HR that wants to get in touch with us, disagrees with what we're saying or agrees and wants to work with us and the other people involved in the FRB to try and find a way of loosening things up or changing things, come and talk to us. But you do have to be aware that Mr. Stuart Bromley here doesn't do slow change. He does big change. So we just have to look out. We have to look out for that one. If anyone's going to change anything, it's going to be Mr. Stuart Bromley. So Stuart, that's great. So again, Future of Work, that group that's maturing now into a different level of conversation and a sort of practical level conversation. And what I like about what we're doing is that we do get that theoretical, but we're always brought that back down to earth, if you like, by the people actually doing the role. And you've got years and years of experience of this stuff. And it's good to have a sort of reality check on these things, which is great. We're also going to be talking, I must say to everybody, we're going to have a session, we're starting a session on AI, which people have been asking us to do for a little while. That'll be coming up in a few weeks, and you'll be leading that. Many people would have read in the news, seen the news about the McDonald's empowered AI app, which was putting chicken nuggets on top of ice creams, I think. So there's obviously some work to do with McDonald's. Perhaps we'll send them an invite. But if you do want to join that conversation on AI, and again, it's a practical conversation on AI, then get in touch. So we're going to move on, Stuart, this week to diversity and inclusion. And I've sort of put my head above the parapet a little bit on this one for this discussion to say, what about the business case? What about the commercials for diversity and inclusion? And it's an interesting perspective, because just as when we were starting on the journey for customer experience, no one's saying you shouldn't do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. But I'm just thinking, if we don't look at business cases and we don't look at the commercials, are we missing an element here? Are we missing something of influence? And you've got lots of experience, Stuart, at large organizations and how business cases work. What's your perspective on diversity and inclusion and business cases?
I think you're going to look at this almost on two levels, and I think you just touched on it a bit. I think, at a macro level, if you think you have to, create a business case in order to get to diversity and inclusion where it needs to be, then you're almost on a loop up now and go home, because it has to be from the heart. You believe a value system that you are. It's not something you need to almost justify, right? So on one hand, I think if you have lost, right, give up. And equally, if you're already espousing and doing all the right things, then again, you won't need a business. It's just as it should be, right? On another hand, I do understand, and again, we talk to people working in as D&I heads in quite large, sophisticated organizations. And if they're trying to prioritize some to do some sort of program of activity in D&I, how do they create a business case on a commercial footing for that investment versus another project? I think could be a wholly sensible thing to do, but I think the business case there will be to do with the attraction and retention of talent, the calibration. Do I say it again? There's other, and actually even this touches on, I guess, in something we probably should explore, Carl. Something we did in our customer, looking at lifetime value, but not lifetime value of customers, but lifetime value of employees, right? It may be that could bear when we're trying to look at my business cases.
Yeah, it's a case of, as we learn with all those years in customer experience, don't ever want to discourage anybody who's passionate about something and wanting to develop it. But at some stage, if you haven't got a business case, it can stop something happening. Even if the business case is not watertight, as some may be, I think if you haven't got it, then there's an issue. Lifetime value is another interesting area, and it's interesting that it's coming across both these discussions with the future of work as well. Is unless companies really know that, then how do they have an accurate picture? I mean, Andy, who's in the diversity and inclusion group, represents very well the older generations coming back into work or just staying in work. And there's a really interesting element of that, where do people actually come in and get up to speed much quicker? So the perception is not quite the same as the reality. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. I'm also interested.
It's interesting, Carl, because actually it also takes us to potentially a really sophisticated AI model. And the reason why I say that is if back to customer experience and justifying customer experience on a commercial footing, it's normally something to do with the benefits to increase share of wallet, loyalty, and recommendation, right? It's those sorts of things. And then there's absolute equivalence for employee. And in the customer experience world, the commercial justification doesn't not knowing that if we increased those things by X, that's what it would be worth commercially. How much increase you're going to get by a certain project on those things. There was much less transparency of, if I pull this lever, this amount, right? And actually that's where potentially an AI model could really help you try and understand levers and much of an improvement do you actually make. And I think the same could be true in the experience space, where again you're looking at the same things: recommendation, loyalty, retention, all these same things. Share of wallet, I guess, would be discretionary, something like that we've also talked about at length in some of these sessions. And you could look at, by doing certain things, how much of an improvement you're going to get, and you could have an AI model that try and predicts those sorts of things.
A great connection between. Yeah, great connection between all the subjects there. But you're right. And when you start to look at it, so if we've got all these, we all have lots of different levers to pull and push, right, to try and get things done. Always, I'm saying with, don't not have some of the levers, right? Even if that lever's not your strongest suit, right? Don't not have it, right? And you may get a shock and you may get a surprise, because I think you're right to point out AI and data. With employee data, as that gets more and more sophisticated, we can compare sickness rates. I'm not sure how you do discretionary effort. I don't think I even like the phrase, but I know what you're getting at. If we can build a picture of this stuff, then we will start to understand. And as we talked about with collaboration, if we could measure that, we would get a much better understanding as a business what is effective and what, who's the most productive, who are the big influencers. If we can start to uncover that sort of stuff, it'll be another way of backing up most of the stuff that we've said about culture and about behaviors and about loyalty. We need to try and, I think we should be able to bring more and more evidence to it. It's the same as when you look at AI and you look at some of the things it's doing in the scientific arena. There was some great news the other day about Alzheimer's, or was it, I think, Parkinson's. That's because there's so much data that can analyze so quickly that you get a different view. And I can't help feeling that with the employee piece, you're absolutely spot on. If we can get enough of a data and enough view, we can back up and really bring some weighty evidence to back up doing the right thing. And again, there's nothing wrong with doing the right thing. Let's just try and back it up with more tangible data.
I agree, and we did touch on this at the back of the last Gen session when we were talking about influence, and I think for most companies use storytelling as a clear mechanism to try and bring to life some of these things through great examples, but they tend to be almost shot in the foot, embarrassing errors of judgment using storytell about to almost embarrass change. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a perfectly sensible strategy. At the sort of, I guess, the negative end of the spectrum around eliminating poor things, rather than building on the good things, the great things that they might actually be more invisible because no one talks about it because it's just the way it is and how it should be, right? And therefore, I think you're right. Using data to help justify would be a wholly used as part of a broader influencing strategy.
Yeah, and as we know, Stuart, that people are different, right? And some people will be taken by the emotional story and will be driven by that, and that's great. Other people aren't. I remember when I used to do a lot of conferences, I used to chair conferences, you'd get some very passionate people talking about service recovery usually, and they would inspire 50% of the audience. The other 50% were just sitting there thinking, how was that error made in the first place? I'm going off to improve my processes so that can't happen. So you're absolutely right. So this is what I think we mean. You need to have a broader influencing package so that we can bring everybody on board. And that's the more people you, as you know, Stuart, the more people you can bring on board, the more. Same with anything you're trying to influence in your own life. You don't just have one way of trying to persuade people. You usually have a whole different way, and money, commercials is part of that discussion. So I think that's where we're getting to with the diversity and inclusion, especially. But it will be interesting to see, Stuart, as we go through these different groups, that they all end up in that melting pot of AI, which is good and poor, all in the same argument. With AI, Stuart. Do you get a feeling there's a growing divide between people who get it, understand it, and people that don't get it, don't want to get it, scared of it? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there is that mix. I think there are people got their head in the sand and trying to just goes away. I don't. That's hope is not a strategy, as one of my old bosses used to say. I think you have to learn. I also think AI is overused as a term. I think people use it for the wrong things, and therefore, there is an awful lot of hype behind AI. And if you look at where AI acts the best, the amount of / preparedness you've got to put in place to make it effective can be substantial. Data and your data governance and your data quality is fundamental to training your AI models. And if you haven't got good data, and actually a lot of these businesses that we certainly talk to isn't quite where it needs to be, the effort just to get your data right before you can consider it is no mean feat, right? So I think there's an awful lot of people that talk a good story on this stuff, but really are not in a position to really use. But putting your head in the sand on the other side just is not the answer either.
And isn't it again interesting, Stuart? We were talking about data governance and how important it was 10, 15 years ago, because it was always going to develop that way. So once again, great to talk to you, Stuart. I'm really looking forward to the diversity session this week. If you've got any views you agree or disagree, please get in contact with us. There's a couple of people on LinkedIn I've just pinged up with some comments, so I'll be looking forward to reading those. So yeah, frb.buzz if you want to join us for any of these discussions that we have. The exploration sessions are free. In fact, you can just talk to us nicely, and we'll let you in the door. So once again, thank you, Stuart, and we'll speak again next week.